Hey guys, this is SAAD for the SAAD Truth. This is a continuation of a two-part series. Earlier today, I had Ken Klonsky, who is the gentleman who worked tirelessly for about a decade with the legendary Hurricane Carter to free the man who is, I'm honored to have him on my show, David McCallum. How are you doing, sir?
I am doing really good. Thank you, Dr. Saad, and it's really nice to speak to you too.
Likewise, I just want to tell the folks who may have not watched the first part. I only posted it a couple of hours ago. I learned of your story last week while just sitting at home lazing around. I started watching this documentary, which was uh, done by Ken Klonsky's son with another colleague, and I was just so moved by the story that I thought I have to speak to this gentleman, especially, which we'll talk about later, given the manner in which you've responded to this unbelievable injustice. So maybe you could first start by just telling us the story that you went through.
Sure. So on October 27th, 1985, in New York City, a young 20-year-old Caucasian man by the name of Nathan Brenner was found in a park not far from where I lived in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn. As a result of law enforcement finding the body in this particular neighborhood, so an investigation ensued. So where the investigating officers in the case started canvassing, the neighborhood, trying to talk to people and try to get information and that sort of thing about what may or may not have occurred in this particular crime. So what happened was there are two individuals in my neighborhood, both 20 years old, both been known to commit crimes of all sorts. They were actually they were eventually arrested in Queens for an armed robbery, and as a result, and based on the investigation that was taking place with the Blenner death, they asked these individuals, do they know anybody in the neighborhood who may know something about the case? So what happened was the adjoining officers from the 83rd precinct, they arrested my childhood friend Willie Stuckey. They took Willie Stuckey to the police station. They questioned him, they interrogated him, and Willie at that time made a so-called confession. During the course of the interrogation of Willie Stuckey, Willie implicated me as a person who actually shot Mr. Blenner. But later on, of course, after Willie Stuckey was arrested and confessed to the crime, I was apprehended about 3 hours later, and I was taken to the police station. When I came to the police station, they took me upstairs to a very small windowless room. And one of the officers asked me, well, first, before I go there, there's this procedure called good cop, bad cop. And I'm sure it happens everywhere. So when I was first taken up to this small windowless room, one of the officers started asking me, of course, my name, where I grew up at, or like sports, that sort of thing. So, but his tone was very, very mild, even tone and that sort of thing. So I was, I guess, at ease. But then another officer came in. The main officer, police officer Joseph Buddha came in, and he had a completely different tone. He was a bit more nastier than the other individual. He was pretty much aggressive. So he asked me, did I know anything about someone being shot in the park a week before, which would be October 20th. So when I answered no, the police officer Buddha slapped me in my face. He slapped me really hard. So at that time, of course, I'm handcuffed behind my back, sitting in the chair. So he slapped me. So he said, "Look, I'm going to ask you one more time." And so he said, "I better tell him what he want to hear." So he picked up a chair, asked to hit me in my head with the chair. So at that point, I gave him what I guess the confession.
Now, you give that confession obviously at a moment of duress, but you're under stress, you're a young kid, you don't know what the hell's going on. You think that, is it that you're thinking that if I just tell him whatever he wants, at least I can get out of here, return home, and I can regroup, and then somehow the truth will come out? In other words, what is it that can cause someone, in this case yourself and your friend who also, confessed to things that didn't happen, what is it that can cause you psychologically to say, yeah, I'm going to confess to whatever you want, even though you didn't do it? Put us through that mindset.
Sure. So during the interrogation, of course, when this police officer Buddha was questioning me, he also said to me if I confessed to the crime that he would let me go home. And I actually believed him. I mean, I really thought if I told him what he wanted to hear, basically, me witnessing this murder in terms of Willie Stuckey shooting this individual. So it wasn't a matter of Willie Stuckey saying that I shot Mr. Blenner, and I in turn said that Willie Stuckey shot Mr. Blenner. So I was promised that if I confessed to the crime, that he would let me go home.
Did you ever speak to Willie and say, "Hey, brother, what the hell happened? Why did you spin that tale? Did that ever happen between you two?"
Well, actually, unfortunately, it did not. Well, it happened after the confessions and the videotape confessions were made. So we were put into a bullpen to be taken for processing at a place they would call central booking. So when I was sitting in the bullpens, basically is what we call them here in New York City, for example, we had Willie and I started talking because we were in the same pen, we were talking to each other. And I said to Willie very clearly, "Look, what was you doing, man? Why did you say that?" Because first of all, I know he didn't commit the crime, and he obviously knew that I didn't commit the crime because during the time that they said this crime was committed, Willie and I were both in the park playing handball with my sister and her friends. Okay, so when I asked Willie, he said, "David, they beat me up. They slapped me. They hit me, and they made me tell them what they wanted to hear." Of course, I was very upset about that. I mean, very angry, and I was very angry for a long time. But of course, when things started maturing and started kind of thinking about what had happened to me as well, I said, "Look, you know what? And it happened. I understand, and it happened, and I eventually got over it somehow, and we sort of moved on from that."
So now now you go sort of through the process, you go through the trial. As you're going through the trial, are you thinking, surely the truth is going to come out now? Surely justice is going to be served. There is no way, notwithstanding my silly confession, that they're going to find me guilty. Is that sort of the mindset that you're going into the trial? Is that how you're thinking?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, without question, I thought we were both going to be acquitted of these charges. Number one, because we didn't commit the crime. And number two, we felt like the evidence that they had, which basically was the videotape confession at that particular time, we felt like it wouldn't stand up in court. When they see, at least when the jury hear these confessions, they're going to see how inconsistent that these confessions are with one another. So, our confessions were filled with what they would call false-fed facts that were given to Willie Stuckey and I that only the arresting officers would know. But at the same time, our confessions were inconsistent, knowing that they dovetail off one another. So we felt like, of course, with no other evidence, there were no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints, no DNA, none of that stuff. We felt like we were nothing, no evidence at all to put us in anywhere near this particular crime. Wow. So we honestly felt like we were gonna win trial.
Okay, so now you're, I think, 17, correct?
Yes, during trial I'm 17. Yes.
Okay, and had you been, in trouble in the past, and any?
Yes, I've been in trouble in the past. I got arrested for a robbery. I got arrested for trespassing. As a young kid, just being kind of silly. There's a rural not too far from where I used to live at in Brooklyn, and we used to go there. And you're not allowed to go up there, because it's private property, that sort of thing. But I myself was up there with a couple of friends before, and the police stopped us, and they took us down to the police station. And then they eventually released us.
So the reason I'm asking is because, even if you had been a hardened criminal, which you weren't, you're 17 years old, you certainly were not prepared for the eventual reality of being found guilty and then thrown in the lion's den, right? You're now in adult prison. You're in the professional leagues. You're in the A leagues.
Yes.
You're a kid. You're 17, right? Is it exactly all the things that we hear about in prison when a young kid goes in? It's not going to be pretty. You give us however many details you want to give us, but put us through how it is for a young kid to walk into this place. Never mind that you're innocent, just the fact that you got to walk in and now you have to survive in this place.
Yes, most definitely. So just to be clear, I was 16 years old when I was arrested, and I was 17 years old when I started trial. So when I was first arrested for this case, I was taken to a place called Rikers Island. Now, anybody I would think of living anywhere close to North America would either heard about this particular prison or somehow maybe read about it. This is a rough time. I'm talking 1985, for example. It was really bad. It was really bad. So I was put in a youth detention center because I was, of course, being 16 years old. So I was in a place where there were cuttings, stabbings. There were racial riots between inmates and correctional officers. It was not uncommon to see correctional officers beat up on inmates for whatever reason, sometimes for no reasons at all. So for me, I think, sort of lucky because when I was on Rikers Island, so on Rikers Island in that youth detention center, on the other side of the building, they have adults. They have an adult population there. So when I would see these guys walking through the hallway, whether they're going to the library or to the mess hall to eat, I would just kind of watch them because I wanted to somehow kind of get close to these guys and just kind of pick their brain a little bit. And so I finally caught my break one time. I went up to the law library. There was a few of those guys up there. And I was just sitting there. I didn't go up to the law library with no intention of reading any law book or anything. Like I just wanted to give me these guys present just to hear from them. Like what were some of the things that they would do in their housing units, because what they were doing there, I clearly was not seeing that where I was. All I constantly saw was violence, whether it's fighting, cutting, stabbing, like I mentioned earlier. So I would talk to these guys, and they would sort of mentor me a little bit about, how to conduct myself where I was, because I was letting them know how frustrated and angry and how scared I was at the same time. And they would just kind of reassure me just to, mind my business, that sort of thing. And so I kept those little tidbits and I kept those and gave those heavy consideration, especially coming from these guys. So I think I wasn't, of course, fully matured at that time, but I at least had some ideas about how to conduct myself while I was there. Just sort of basically minding my business and that sort of thing, and just staying out of people's way, basically.
So so then you leave Rikers Island, you go to your permanent. Did you serve all your time in one prison, or were you moved to multiple prisons?
And I was moved to multiple prisons. So after I was sentenced on November 17th, 1985, I was taken to a place called Elmira. And when I was taken to this place, it's a reception center. So I wasn't going to be there no more than, let's say, 30 days. So I was there for about 30 days. And after that, I was taken to a place called Kaksaki Correctional Facility. Now, this facility at Kaksaki is where they put most people with, at least especially back in 1985, they put them there, 1986. They put them there because they were young and that sort of thing. And so I stayed in that jail for about almost 2 years, as a matter of fact. And from there, I went to a place called Eastern Correctional Facility. Eastern Correctional Facility at the time was a model prison. It was one of those prisons where things didn't happen often. And if they did, it was a mild surprise, to tell you the truth. So it was sort of like an honor jail because for me, I didn't catch any tickets or nothing like that. I sort of kind of stayed clear of trouble. And so I stayed in that jail for 18 years.
Wow.
And from Eastern Correctional Facility, I went to a place called Arthur Kill on Staten Island, New York. But they closed that jail down in 2000, the prison down in 2005. And I was taken to Otisville Correctional Facility, which is in the middle part of New York State. And I stayed there until I was eventually released in 2014.
Wow. Now, is the general, we don't have to dwell on this for long, but I just want people to kind of get a sense of what prison life is like. Is the general sort of idea that we hear, at least on the outside, that, once you go into prison, you're very quickly assorted as either somebody that could be preyed on or not, and you better hope that you send the signal that you're not going to be a prey, otherwise it's going to be a long ride for you. Is that generally what ends up happening, that you sort of have to establish your creds very quickly? And especially for a guy like you who wasn't a hardened criminal, who's a young guy, did you face that pressure that I better, signal to everybody around me that I'm not to be messed with? Or how does that dynamic work?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. And I think for me, and I think part of my survival kind of stemmed from the fact that I was a sort of a big person for my age. Maybe that kind of helped me in some ways, kind of keep people up off me, and basically, so to speak. And I think that's what kind of helped me. But I also think what kind of helped me is I really humbled myself to people. And for some interesting reason, I think people sort of took a liking to me. And I like to say, in some ways, Dr. Saad, that I was sort of lucky in some sense.
Right.
Because guys they genuinely liked me. I wasn't a troublemaker. I was even killed. I was really consistent in how I did things with whichever prison I went to, for example. And I think not only that, I think the staff saw that too. And so I think from that standpoint, but generally speaking, I think guys do, and people sometimes, depending on your stature or whatever, or what you may have been arrested for, let's just say if you're in for sexual assault, that's usually frowned upon in prison, or doing something to children, that's an issue, So for me, I wasn't, of course, in those particular situations, but that does occur inside the prison. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so now in terms of the psychology of hope that you must have, because every single minute that you're spending there, I mean, it kind of reminds me of Shawshank Redemption. I don't know if you saw the movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes, I did.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so, you're sitting there every second knowing that you're not supposed to be there. How do you go on every day? Is it that you don't let it sort of fester in you every day? I mean, you have it as it's in your background that I have to get out of here, but I also have to accept this reality and find a home here? Or are you consistently, fire under your feet? I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. How are you navigating through that reality every
Sure.
day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there were many days when I felt despair. I felt hopeless in some ways. It's particularly like when I kept following my appeals. They were constantly denied, and that was wearing on me. Not only me, but it was really wearing on me to the point where I started thinking about my family, my mom in particular. Because I knew that by me constantly getting these appeals being denied, it was wearing on her. So there were times when my appeals would get denied that I wouldn't even mention anything to it because I know the potential damage that it can do to her and the rest of my family. So I sort of kept mum on that particular issue.
Wow, unbelievable. So then so I think you would have been in there for at least, is it 19 years when you reached out to Rubin Carter, then connected with Ken Klonsky? Is that roughly the right
Yes,
timeline?
yes, about 20, yes, it's about 19, yes, about 19 years I've been in. And it's interesting how I actually reached out to these guys. So in prison, I was in Eastern Correctional Facility at the time. And I was in a law library, I was a law clerk. And a friend of mine, Earl Coleman, I really have to name drop him because he's so instrumental in this whole process. When I'm finished with it, you'll see exactly why. So he was reading this magazine called The Sun. Now, The Sun magazine is one of these, it's a literary magazine where you can have short stories in it that you can read and, that sort of thing. And I really like reading this magazine. But on this particular night, in a law library, I had no real intention of reading anything. I just wanted to sort of peruse the magazine and until I went back to my house to start to pay for the next day. So I said, let me see, of course, let me see the magazine. So he let me see it. So I was perusing the magazine. I come across an interview with Ken Klonsky and Rubin Hurricane Carter. Now, I knew who Rubin Hurricane Carter was. I knew, that he was a former prize fighter. I knew that he had spent a lot of years in jail, in prison, for a crime he didn't commit. So because I knew this, I immediately said, you know what? I have to write this guy. So what I did was I wrote the Sun magazine and asked them, could I get the contact information for Ken Klonsky and Rubin Hurricane Carter? So the author from the Sun magazine was kind of to let me know, look, I can't divulge that information, but what I can do is I can send your letter, I can forward your letter on to Ken Klonsky or Rubin Hurricane Carter, which he did. So about a week and a half later, I heard from Ken Klonsky let me know that he had read my letter and that my letter touched him deeply and that he would pass my letter on to Dr. Rubin Hurricane Carter, as he said, and we'll see what Rubin has to say about that. But he also said that he couldn't guarantee anything. But at that time, I understood because at that time that I initially contacted Ken Klonsky to try to get in contact with Rubin Hurricane Carter, I was on a letter writing campaign because my state and federal appeals were exhausted. So I really had no other recourse other than a post-conviction motion, which I filed a couple of those as well. So So there were no guarantees. And I understood that there's no guarantees in anything. I wrote about 600 or something letters trying to get help. So I wrote the Daily News, I wrote the New York Times, I wrote law firms, I wrote lawyers, I wrote investigators. I mean, I was all over the place. Some agencies and some individuals I would write more than once because in my mind, I wasn't going to take no for an answer because I felt like, you know what, this is my chance here because my state and federal appeals were exhausted. I had no other place to go but to start this letter writing campaign and hope that somebody would, take a like and at least believe what I had to say to them.
Well, so I mean, it is literally possible that had you not been with this gentleman at the same time in the law library to see, I mean, the whole chain of events that eventually led to you and I sitting here and chatting could have gone in a completely different trajectory.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that because I could have easily said, you know what, never mind, or I'm going to go in the bathroom, I'm going to go over another section of the library, or I'm going to go back to the house a bit earlier than maybe I expected to or I wanted to. But that didn't happen. But so, I think about that a lot. And often when I do public speaking, I mention these things sometimes just to let people know you can't take anything for granted.
Wow.
And some decisions you make, you will, they could be really, really beneficial, or you can lose out. But in this case, I took the magazine and I saw it. Had Earl not even had that magazine that night, I wouldn't be here talking to you now. So
wow, that's unbelievable.
Very, very good point.
It gives you goosebumps. So when you were in prison, did you pursue any educational I mean, you're obviously a very well-spoken gentleman. So did you sort of immerse yourself, not unlike the way Hurricane Carter did, immerse yourself in books? Was that the route to escape? Was to free your mind?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, excuse me.
No, no, please go ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I did. So for me, I was a pretty, I would say, decent student when before I was arrested. I was okay in school. Honestly, I could have been better, So when I went to prison, I had some semblance of different knowledge, basically. But I acquired my GED in prison. I went to school. I went to school in prison. I read a lot of books. I read a lot of books because, again, books were an escape for me. And so was watching sports to some extent, because what that really did for me is it kept me away from individuals and they kept me out of harm's way. So I did a lot of stuff. I spent a lot of time with myself. I wasn't antisocial or anything like that. I just felt like it was important for me to sort of be into myself, because sometimes in prison you don't know who and what and why. So the best course of action that one can take is, especially in the situation being in prison, anything can happen at any given time. You have to make sure you pay attention to all the details and all the circumstances around it.
Now, I'm going to ask you in a second what were some of your favorite books that you remember in your time in prison. But before I do that, when you're in prison, are the other either prisoners or officers aware of your very staunch and adamant position that I'm innocent and so on? Or is it, yeah, sure, we're all innocent here, buddy. Join the long queue of innocent people.
Sure,
How are they reacting to that? Are they believing you, or you're just a baloney?
No, I think for me, for the most part, they believe me. And you're right. I think 99.9% of the prison population say that they're innocent, and that 0.1% would say, yeah, I did what I did. So for me, I think the way I conducted myself, I mean, I was very, like I said, very mature, very, very humble person. And every time officers, staff saw me, they either saw me with my head buried in a book, or they saw me in the prison yard. I'm usually walking by myself, or I'm sitting alone. Again, not that I was antisocial. It was just that I felt like it was important for me just to do that, just to survive those circumstances, because it was not only was it a physical battle, it was also a psychological battle for me too. And one of those psychological battles was to, sort of get, I guess in some ways, in some strange ways, to get to know myself, get to know myself better, because I was determined to get out of prison, because I didn't want to die in prison, obviously. So I took the position that I'm gonna do whatever's necessary for me to get out of there.
Wow. Are you in touch with any? You obviously must have, given the amount of time you spent in prison, you've probably made a lot of close, tight friendships that most of us will probably never understand. That kind of intimacy. You literally are sharing very small spaces with all these folks. Are you in touch with a lot of them? And if yes, how do they react to your freedom? I mean, are they envious? Are they fully happy for you? What's the dynamic like?
Well, I'm in touch. I wouldn't say I'm in touch with a whole bunch of the individuals, because a lot of the individuals that I knew actually made it out. They were paroled and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Okay. But the individuals that I'm in touch with in prison, I mean, what I try to do when I talk to them, I just try to be very, very, like, sort of even keeled. Look, they're hurting in there, and I know how that feels to be in that position. So I try not to be overbearing, so to speak.
Right.
I just try to let them know what's going on out there, and some of the things that they watch on television are actually happening out here, and that sort of thing. And so we talk about stuff like that, about, how they are maintaining themselves to put themselves in a position to get out, and that stuff like that. So, I keep in touch with the guys that way. And, because I know when I was incarcerated, for example, I developed a really strong network of people from Toronto,
right.
Basic, I mean, a lot of people that I would never even in my wildest dreams thought or believed that I would meet. And so my friend, for example, Ken Clancy's son Ray, who was one of the co-directors of the documentary David and Me, he befriended me. I guess I befriended him. And he and his friends, of course his girlfriend Robbie, they would come visit me, and they would just talk to me about basic things, about getting on airplanes. And because I've never been on an airplane before, so they were talking about some of the most basic fundamental things that was happening out in society, And I would soak it up, because for me, it was almost like living out there. Right. And when I used to have conversations with them, Rubin used to say to me too, I got to start putting myself outside of prison. But when he initially said that to me, I didn't understand what that meant. I thought he meant like I got to, break out, escape or something. But obviously he didn't mean that. He just meant that I had to put my mind out, while I may be in there physically, I should put my mind out there on the outside. And he said that's the way you just start living your life, and maybe that can help you work your way towards actually getting out, literally. So when I started understanding what he did, what he was saying to me, I started trying to take those cues and kind of take his advice into heart. And I just started practicing that, like thinking on the outside, and just this life itself, and just being able to do some of the most basic fundamental things of freedom and liberty. I mean, walking down the street, eating ice cream, or whatever the situation is. Don't take anything for granted. And that's some of the things that I actually thought about when I was in prison. So it's not easy to do, because you put yourself in these positions, but at the same time you want to literally be in that position.
Right.
It was a process, but it was something that I practiced over time, and it actually worked for me.
I don't know if you know this, but Ray went to the university where I'm a professor at.
Oh, Concordia.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. That's interesting, too, because at the time, Ray and Mark Laming, the other co-producer, co-director of David and me, when they initially, Ray initially brought it to my attention. They said, I'm going to make a film one day about this. Okay. I said, okay, that's fine. This younger man is talking, maybe he's trying to make me feel good. And so, but it took time, and they actually started the process while at Concordia, those two individuals.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and they would talk, they would come and they would show me footage, and during the filming, they would show me footage, and but it all started at Concordia. Yes.
Exactly. So going back to books, could you share with us some of the books that you found to be most awe-inspiring for you while you were in prison?
Yeah, sure. So one of the books that inspired me was The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. The reason why that book inspired me the most, because that book sort of touched home. It touched home base for me and people like me, for example. A lot of young African Americans bless you, New York State. Welcome. In New York State, was getting arrested for some of the most lowest level crimes, like possession of marijuana, that kind of thing. So, but it was the way in which she wrote the book. Yet I had the opportunity to also watch and listen to an interview with her about the book. So she brought the book to life for somebody like me, because I knew a lot of individuals, and I was around a lot of individuals, even back in 1985, and of course throughout the course of my incarceration, who was in jail, in prison, for crimes that possession of marijuana and that sort of thing, and people were given a lot of time about that. The next book I liked was the autobiography of Malcolm X. When I had the opportunity to read that book, it really inspired me. It opened my eyes a little bit more about the civil rights movement, and that kind of thing. So I was reading stuff, and a friend of mine named Gary Dolan would also send me books too, and he sent me, I forgot the name of the book that he sent me, but it was one of the, I don't know if it was Huckleberry Finn, but it was one of these books that it forced you to think,
right?
Because I was into philosophy,
Nice.
That's actually one of the courses that I took among many, because I was a college student at Ohio University. I was working through their long distance program, so I took a few courses there. I took philosophy, history, business, English. I took English more important because I wanted to learn how to write better than I thought because I didn't think I was a good writer at all. But the philosophy part of it was really nice, because I would have conversations with friends and stuff like that. And I started learning that it's really not about who's right and wrong in the conversation. It's about taking the information and making it useful for yourself.
Oh, geez, I wish the society at large would learn the lesson that you just said. It's not about proving who's right or wrong, because today we live in an incredibly polarized world where I only operate in my echo chamber.
Without a doubt. And that philosophy course, I have to say, it opened my eyes up to a lot of different things. Because in prison, probably like anywhere else in society, for example, you get in arguments about the most stupidest things, like sports and politics. I try to stay away from those kind of conversations in prison, because everybody wants to be right. Everybody wants to know more than the next person. Right. And for me, I'm just trying to get information, because I can take this information that the person is giving me, I can take that and utilize it elsewhere, And that's what philosophy's taught me. It's not about being right or wrong. And it's all about exchanging information, understanding the person's point of view. It's really not that hard. Wow. Except, unfortunately, ego gets involved and that sort of thing, and pride, and that sort of takes over. But I really tried to avoid those conversations. Even though I had a lot of information because I read a lot, I I didn't ever want to put myself in a position where it becomes some argument.
Right.
An argument is not what you want. A debate is fine because a debate for me is much more level. It's much more, the tone is different. When you argue, it's usually loud, boisterous, and things are said, and that kind of thing. So me, philosophy is probably my most favorite course.
Well, I think what you're talking about now, sort of your very even temperament, your humility, is I think exactly some of the qualities that all those guys in prison saw in you and hence liked you, but also how someone like me who didn't know you from a hole in the wall could see through in that documentary and say, this guy seems like an incredibly dignified guy, an incredibly poised guy, which is, I guess, the next thing that I want to talk about. And actually, that was the main thing that sort of first compelled me to want to speak to you. When I saw you speaking, I'm going to tell you straight out, I think I'm a much lesser man than you, because if I went through what you went through, my outlook on this reality would be, I want to burn the whole world down. Right? I mean, I would be so filled with a desire to seek revenge, a desire to set that which was wrong. I was wrong. And so how are you able? Is it just your temperament that allows you to be pretty much like Buddha? Basically, you're Buddha. How did you do it?
Well, honestly, I'd be lying if I sat and told you, that there wasn't times where I was angry, upset, and frustrated about what had happened to me and what was happening to me, and being in prison for something I didn't do, and knowing that I didn't do it. But what I try to do when I got to those moments is, again, be by myself and just be alone and just stay away from individuals. But more importantly, I was motivated by others, and I will never take sole credit for myself. That would be very, very selfish on my part. So for me, I come from a fairly large family. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters. So my older sister Ella, she has cerebral palsy. She was born without a spine. She's been bedridden her entire life. She's also in the movie David and Me. So knowing her situation. So whenever I'm in prison, I was in prison and things wasn't going well. I wasn't feeling good about much of anything. I would sometimes think about her circumstances. The fact that she's been in bedridden all her life, and the doctor actually literally told my mother that she wouldn't make it past the age of 13, and she's well beyond that. And she inspired me, But my mom also played a significant role in my life too, because when I was first arrested for this case and I was taken to the court for the very first time, they gave me a couple of minutes to speak to my mom, and she came up to where I was sitting, and she said, "David, did you do this?" And I said, "No, Ma, I did not." And the question never came up again, ever.
Wow.
And that was very powerful. Even at that young age, I felt somehow okay.
Because you knew that no matter what, your mother knew the truth. And by her not asking you another time, you knew that she believed you.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And once I knew that, I said, you know what? Not that nothing else mattered, because it did, but the fact that my mom believed me, that really, really helped my psychological state at that time. And I felt good about that, at least that part of my the process.
So, but what about now? Now you're out. Do you only look forward, or do you ever wallow in the past? I mean, someone took 29 years away from you, and no matter how happy you are today and how bright your future might be, that reality always exists. Are you able to not erase it from your memory, but are you able to accept it so that you don't wallow in that poison? Is that what gives you sort of that even temperament? Because I would always be looking back and thinking, God damn it, someone stole 29 years from me. Do you suffer from that, or are you able to put it beside and say, no, I've got a whole future ahead of me. Forget about what happened to me in the past.
Right. So not to take the easy way out on your very good question, it's a combination of both. So when I look back, when I think about it, I look at what happened to me. But sometimes I don't even have to kind of do it consciously. Sometimes it happens subconsciously, right? You see things happen on the news with police killing someone or shooting someone, or whether it's by accident or on purpose. And I think about, how things were when I was incarcerated. And I was incarcerated with a bunch of individuals that'll quick, at least that 0.1% will be quick to tell you that they did this and they did that. But when I think back on my experiences, it kind of inspires me in some strange ways, and it motivates me to know that I sort of persevered, and that what I'm doing now and what I look forward to doing in the future is all, all for the better. It's interesting that you also asked that question because somebody asked me, would you take back everything that ever happened to you? And so when I was first asked that question, I really didn't know how to answer the question because it was such a good one. In other words, there's also a possibility that I could have been killed at some point in my young life.
Right.
I mean, there was that possibility, right? So, and I know typical inmates, they don't like to talk about this. They don't like to think this either or say this, that sometimes jail and prison saves people.
Right.
From themselves, really, sometimes. And I think in some small, strange ways, that happened to me, but I had a hard time accepting that possibility, and I struggled with it quite a lot. But my past is my past, and I don't try to run from it, which is why I do public speaking. I think I talk about it because in some ways it serves as a form of therapy too, when I'm able to sit down and talk about my past in that sort of way.
Well, I think it's not just therapy for you. I think if we were to contextualize your experience, I mean, you have millions of people who every day, and I think I might have shared this with you maybe by email, I can't remember, every day they're whining about something. And I don't mean to imply that people don't have valid reasons for being frustrated, anxious, angry, depressed about things that are happening in their lives. But in the exact same way that you looked at your sister with her condition and used that to contextualize whatever you were going through and say, well, you know what, I actually have it not too badly. I think your story can serve the exact same purpose, right? So if I get up and I'm feeling upset because I've got to apply for something as a professor and I'm stressed out, and I go, I just have to say, oh yeah, David McCallum, right? And then suddenly that serves as a, if you like, I'd like to call it sort of a contextual pill, right? I mean, if you've got high cholesterol, you take Lipitor, your cholesterol goes down. If I take David McCallum pill, suddenly my problems don't seem so bad. So I think that's an incredibly powerful tool that you have to bring people out of their daily miseries. I mean, is that not true?
Oh, that is definitely true. So sometimes I ask myself, and sometimes I even say to other people, what's the worst that can happen to you? You die, right? But you wouldn't know how that feels because when you die, you don't have no feelings, right?
Right.
You can go to prison for the rest of your life or potentially for the rest of your life. How would that feel? Well, if I go to prison for, let's say, 29 years and I get the opportunity to get out, it's actually a blessing because there's no guarantees.
Right.
Because when you set this to 25 to life, which me and Willie were, 25 is the minimum, life is the maximum. So I went to 5 parole boards. I went to 4 parole hearings too, as a matter of fact, And I was on the verge of going to my 5th parole hearing, but I got out a week before. So when I go to my parole hearings, for example, in New York State, you gotta show remorse and you gotta take responsibility for the crime. And I chose to do neither at my parole hearings, but at the same time, always made it a point to show compassion for the victim in this case,
right?
The Brenner, of course, and his family, because I put myself, at least I tried to put myself, at least I tried to think about, if that was my mom, if what happened to Mr. Brenner happened to me, how would my mom react? What would she think? So these are some of the conversations that I would try to have with the parole commissioners, but in New York State, they're rough. They're really tough. You can't really have a conversation with them. It's just Q&A, and that's not what I don't think those kind of circumstances should be about. Because during the course of my prison, my incarceration, I was a model prisoner. I did pretty much everything right. I didn't get in trouble. I respected the staff. I respected authority. I respected my fellow inmates. And so I felt like I did everything that I possibly could to prove to them that I was ready to be released from prison. But unfortunately, it didn't happen that way.
Are you at all in touch, or did they get in touch with you, the family of the victim, since your release and your exoneration?
No, that never happened. And I'm so glad you asked that question, Dr. Saad, because what I do sometimes in my public speaking, and I get this question sometimes, I just simply say that I hope the real perpetrators get caught for this horrible crime, because somebody lost a loved one, and I'm very, very compassionate to that.
Right.
But I've never, they haven't tried to reach out to me or anything like that. No.
That's a shame. Let me ask you one more question that's sort of very serious, and then I want to just talk about some of the stuff that you've had to deal with since coming out, the banalities, learning how to use an iPhone and things like that. But here's a tough one, and I'm so interested and curious to know what you're going to say. So someone like, I mean, no one on earth probably knows better the value of, well, or not the value, knows that the justice system is filled with sinister guys, filled with human error, that many wrongly convicted people could end up in jail. With that in mind, given your past, does that mean that assures that you would be someone who would be against the death penalty? Because, hey, what if you do put somebody to death? Or is it possible to go through what you went through and yet still believe that in certain circumstances someone could engage in such egregious acts and the overwhelming evidence would be so clear? Someone who raped 5 children and his semen is, in their bodies, so there's absolutely no way that we could be unsure that they didn't. Would you be supporting the death penalty, or given your reality, you simply could never accept that? That's a good one.
It's a very good one. and I used to be on the fence with that particular question too, only because I know for a fact that there are many men and sometimes women on death row, probably as we speak, that are innocent. When I say innocent, I mean actually and factually innocent, right?
Right.
But we also know there's some really terrible human beings out in this world who have done some horrendous things. But I think when I think about that, I have to believe that our justice system is better than that, only because our system is there for a reason, And if a person does something horrendous, as killing 5 people and doing something to babies, for example, there's a place for that person, not only in prison, but in a sort of natural hell to some extent, And I think that's not to sort of duck and dodge, but that's the question that you asked. And I think to me, that's prison enough.
Right, I see. So what you're saying basically is that these guys could get such harsh prison justice meted to them that even if you were not to officially kill them, execute them, they would suffer enough that you'd feel vindicated for that.
Yes, but a cynic would say, at the same time, these people are benefiting off the state because taxpayers have to pay for these individuals while they're incarcerated. But that may be true. But that's a part of our system. And if you respect the criminal justice system the way I've learned how to respect it,
right?
Maybe they would agree with, I guess, what I just mentioned.
All right, two more questions.
Sure.
Number one, what of all of the endless new things that you experience coming from the most banal to the most profound, right? I mean, what are the things that you've had the most difficulty adapting to in the modern world outside of the prison in the 29 years that you were away?
Okay, sure. So crowds, okay?
Crowds.
In prison, your space is so important. I mean, really, it's just very important. You don't want to be in crowds in prison. Like I mentioned earlier, things happen, and you can get caught literally right in the middle of something.
Right.
So for me, I work in Lower Manhattan, for example, when I get on a train and the trains are crowded. I remember when I was a child, it used to be fun around the trains. Now it's not so fun anymore because it's crowded. There are delays, there's this and there's that. So when I'm around a crowd of people, sometimes I get a bit tense.
Okay.
Maybe I start sweating a little bit. And that's, I think, a product of just being in prison for so long, and some of that sort of environment kind of left with me. And it's still happening as we speak, And that's something that I wouldn't say I have to sort of get used to, but it's something I have to sort of understand and accept to some extent, because that's kind of the residual effects of being in prison, whether you committed a crime or not. Just that environment in and of itself creates so many different things that you have to figure out a way to sort of navigate those things. And just, I would say that's probably been my main issue right there. But as far as technology, that's a completely different animal. I definitely struggle with that even today as I struggle with technology. But, sometimes technology is dangerous too. I know, for example, when I'm on a train going to work, I read a book. And you really see people read books anymore on trains. Everybody's pretty much had their heads buried in their phones, where they read news off their phone or whatever they're doing. For me, I just kind of think it's kind of cool just to kind of do some of the most old things, so to speak, that that kind of made riding the train fun. But yeah.
Have you taken any selfies yet?
Oh, I have, yes, absolutely, definitely took some selfies. It's interesting. But the first week I was out, I went to Lower Manhattan to do an interview with the Huffington Post. You know, and I'm on the train station. I see this guy. The train platform is packed, and so I see this guy leaning over the kind of the platform taking a selfie, and the train is coming. I'm like, I'm so scared. So I'm looking at my attorney like, he looking at me like, David, welcome back. You know what I mean? This is the norm. There's nothing unusual about what this person is doing.
Wow.
And I was really scared for the person, And so it was nothing for me, especially during the first week or two out, seeing people walk across the street literally with their facing their phones with traffic. And I mean, so it's those things like that sort of kind of like reminded me, like, you know what? You're not there anymore.
Before I ask you the last question, which will be a very positive question, this just came to my mind because I think we're almost the same age. I think I'm a bit older than you. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 48 years old, yes.
48 years old?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, that's right. I guess I could have worked it back from when you were 85, in 1985, you were 17 and so on.
Right.
So I'm a bit older. I'm about 5 years older than you. So we probably might know the same music in our so next week. Now, what I'm about to tell you will only make sense if you know who I'm talking about. Next week on my show, I will be speaking with the lead singer of the Stylistics. Do you know who the Stylistics are?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yes, of course.
Isn't that? Oh, okay, very nice. Because I think I mentioned this to someone. To a friend of mine who's a very popular journalist. He was on my show recently, but it's sort of the story fell flat because I don't think he knew who it was exactly. And I'm thinking, who the hell doesn't know the Stylistics?
Yeah, no, yeah.
And the reason why I'm saying this is because because we were talking about technology. I mean, technology is both dangerous, but it's also incredibly liberating in that it allows me to meet you. It allows me to meet Russell Tompkins Jr., the lead singer of Stylistics. How the hell would I have ever met? Our worlds had zero chance of overlapping. And next week, I'll be sitting with him just like I'm sitting with you. He was in my brain when I was living in Lebanon as an 8-year-old child. He's singing "You Are Everything." And I'm gonna be speaking to him. So I think.
Oh, nice.
So it's incredible,
No, so as far, but I'm okay with technology. Technology has done some really good things for me, since I've been out and getting used to using it. So I use this a lot. It's needed to. It's needed today, obviously, in today's world. Now, some people just say it's a little bit much, but it's fine. I'm not complaining. I don't have really much to complain about these days, given my previous circumstances. So, so some of the most smallest things bother them. And, for me, I'm like, I've seen some horrible things during my time in prison, especially. And just to let me know, look, you know what? That ain't that bad. That ain't too bad.
Or the old expression, don't sweat the small stuff, right?
Exactly. I'm telling you. Believe me, I've been there. I've seen it. And that's like even on the outside, you walk the streets, you see this and you see that, and you just, you put your head down and you just remember, where you've been.
Right.
And for me, that's more than enough motivation for me because, that place, prison it's a horrible place. Malcolm, in reading Malcolm's autobiography, there's something that he had mentioned in there that I think is a misconception when some people hear it. He said being in prison is actually a good thing. Yeah, I don't think he meant that in the obvious sense that you should be enjoying yourself and they're throwing parties and that sort of thing. I think what he really is saying that in prison, you have an opportunity,
right,
to learn more about yourself and to learn about things in general. And it's still, I guess what he was also saying, there's no excuse,
right,
to be in a place like that, no matter how long, and not come out better.
Right.
There's no excuse for that. And I think that's the message that I think he was trying to convey. But some people hear that on first glance, they're like, "You crazy? I could never," but that's not how he intended the question.
Nice. When I was speaking earlier to Ken, and this will be my last question or last comment. When I was speaking to Ken earlier today, towards the end of our chat, and I hope you'll watch it at some point. I actually got choked up, and I usually am very composed. I got choked up as I was telling the story of your daughter. So let me now try to say it without choking up. One of the most poignant moments for me in the documentary, David and Me, was when you were in prison and you were saying that I hope one day to get out and, to be a father. I really want to be a father. And then I was telling Ken the story that when you and I first connected on the phone when we were chatting, and you said something like, "Oh, that's my daughter" or something, and that had really touched me because I knew that big dream of yours had materialized. So maybe you could tell us about this as a way to sort of end this tragic story on a very positive note.
Yeah. So I came from a huge family. Like I said, mentioned before. 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and when I was in prison, especially when I went in at such a young age, I obviously had to have any children, that kind of thing. And I used to sometimes just sit in the visiting room. I met a lot of individuals in prison. I had a lot of friends in prison, and some of them had children themselves. They had young children too. Some of them, And I would see sometimes them being in the visiting room with their children, and I would see. I would look at it both ways. It was just a sad thing, but it was also a good thing, And I used to sit there sometimes, even with my own visitors. I used to say, wish an opportunity like that could happen for me in prison, and if I could ever got the opportunity when I got out to have a child, that's what I want to have a child. And it didn't matter to me, whether it was a boy or a girl. It really didn't matter. I just wanted to be a dad. I wanted to know how it felt, because I wanted to know how it is, because it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
It's a beautiful thing, and I mean, and I have to say sometimes when she drive me up the wall, I won't trade her in for anything, And that's something that's what she's the love of my life, period.
Do you think you'll have more children, or are you stopping at one?
That's a good question. I think I have more.
Oh, good.
I'm with a really, really good woman. She's a really nice young lady, and we get along. For the most part, we have our disappointments, disagreements, that kind of thing. I guess that's natural. But yeah, I would definitely like to. But being a dad, and I just wish my dad was alive to see this.
Right.
He would have doted on her, obviously. There's no question he would have done that. My dad passed away in 2005. Of course, during the time I was incarcerated. But just being able to get up in the morning and go to work. Sometimes even now, getting up in the middle of the night because she need to be tended to. That's okay. I mean, it's hard to do when you got to get up 5 o'clock the next morning and go to work. I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm not going to complain, because that's a good issue. I'm not really going to say problem. It's a good issue to have, and I won't complain.
That's wonderful. If you'll allow me to end on some very tear-jerking words,
Yes.
I've had in my life I've had the chance to meet a lot of very accomplished people in all sorts of domains. But I think, Frank, I truly mean this. I'm not saying this just to to compliment you. I've seldom met someone who, in the very short time that I've known you, who had the dignified outlook and the poise that you have. And I can frankly say that I am honored to know you, and I wish more of us could aspire to have your even temperament and your sense of forgiveness. I think the world will be a much better place, and I truly thank you for coming on the show, and I hope that we stay in touch.
Oh, but the most definitely, we can definitely stay in touch without a doubt. And I want to say thank you too for giving me an opportunity to speak to you. I don't run from my past. In some ways, it's okay to talk about it because it's not only it's therapy, it's educational. You get to meet people, and I've been blessed too. I've been to a few places. I've been to Montreal. I've been to Vancouver a couple of times. I've been to California, and I've been to Florida, and I've been to Chicago. So I'm saying this because when I was a kid, always used to wonder what it was like to get on an airplane. Always used to wonder what it was like to travel somewhere. And the fact that I'm able to do that from time to time is actually I've been to Seattle. Is actually a blessing. So those things that I'm not lost on. No matter my age, I sometimes feel like I'm still a child in some ways.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing for the most part.
That's wonderful. Stay on the line. For you guys who are watching or not watching at this point, but will soon, we should have it up very, very soon. Thank you so much, Mr. McCallum. Stay on the line.
Thank you. Sure.